Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll wait just another minute to get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to welcome.us at the table. We're going to wait another 30 seconds to get started. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Ella Bruno, and I'm on the Community Building and Engagement team here at welcome.us. This event is hosted by welcome.us, and we are a nonprofit, non-government organization founded in 2021 to equip and empower Americans to participate in the work of welcoming newcomers. This is our monthly live webinar, which we call welcome.us at the table. This is a space for welcomers who care about immigration pathways, the newcomers we've welcomed, and the stories of welcome that unite us. This month, we are focusing on just that. Welcomers all around the nation are rolling up their sleeves and supporting their neighbors in innovative and meaningful ways. We've been deeply inspired by the welcomer community this year, which is why we're dedicating the second half of our time today to spotlighting some of these welcomers. We have a lovely panel for you this afternoon, some of whom were nominated for the Heart of Welcome campaign, which was our October campaign that celebrated the compassion and action of newcomers and welcomers across the country. On this panel, we'll have Jessica Erickson from California, Seal Hope from Wyoming, Susan Bueller from South Dakota, and Matt Johnson from Pennsylvania. Before we hear from them, we'll be joined by welcome.us Senior Policy Counsel and Special Advisor Manpreet Theji to share some policy updates. We won't have any time for extended live Q&A in this webinar, but Manpreet will be answering the most frequently asked questions that were submitted during registration. If you have a case-specific question, we encourage you to seek legal counsel by using the American Immigration Lawyers Association tool in the chat. And with that, I will hand it over to Manpreet.
Thank you so much, Ella. Hello, everyone. So lovely to see you all again. Today, I'll be providing some brief policy updates before I hand it over to our wonderful panel. So the first update, which some of you may have seen in our In the News email, is that there is a change to SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Many immigrants are eligible for this program, SNAP, and the eligibility changed through H.R. 1, the bill that was passed in July called the Big Beautiful Bill. This bill went into effect, the provisions for SNAP went into effect on November 1st, and that includes changes to many newcomers, including refugees, asylum seekers, humanitarian parolees, who could potentially lose eligibility for the SNAP Food Assistance Program. We've created an explainer in the chat. We've created an explainer of the bill that we will be dropping into the chat. At this time, this is a very important update because over the summer, we saw these changes go into effect with the bill, and it related to various public benefits, including Medicaid, SNAP benefits, and other public benefits that this document and policy explainer will go through. And it is important to note that each state is responsible for how these benefits are dispersed, including SNAP benefits. So while the bill did change eligibility for certain immigrant populations for SNAP, every state is responsible for the disbursement and eligibility. So sponsors should check their state's SNAP benefit website, which is usually the Department of Health and Human Services, to understand eligibility requirements. You can read more about the bill and other benefit changes in our policy explainer, which my colleague just dropped into the chat. Additionally, you may recall from our last webinar that USCIS has begun processing and granting reparole for Ukrainians who arrived via the humanitarian parole pathway, Uniting for Ukraine. On October 16th, the Department of Homeland Security issued a notice that it is implementing a $1,000 fee for each time a person is granted humanitarian parole or reparole, as required by the new law, H.R. 1, which the administration calls the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. This fee, we've recently learned, is due when the humanitarian parole or reparole application is actually granted, not when the request is filed. And there are 10 exceptions under which the fee will not be required. For example, serious medical conditions, family death, organ donation, or assistance to U.S. law enforcement. My colleague in the chat dropped into the chat the various exceptions. This new fee is applicable to Uniting for Ukraine beneficiaries in the United States who have a pending reparole application or who intend to apply for reparole in the future. So starting on October 16th, when USCIS decides to grant reparole, they will issue a notice to the applicant stating that their reparole approval is conditional upon payment of the $1,000 fee. USCIS will provide payment instructions and a 30-day payment period to pay this fee for each individual case through the My USCIS portal. Failure to pay within the time period provided in the conditional approval notice would result in a denial of the reparole request. And reparole will only be granted after the fee has been paid. Each individual applicant is required to file for reparole separately and pay the fee, including applicants under the age of 18. That means the fee will apply to every individual of a family unit, including a child, a parent, a grandmother, etc. To be very clear, this does not apply to humanitarian parole programs that have been terminated, such as the processes for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. This is just a fee for programs that still exist or are issuing reparole. We will be sharing an on-demand webinar that we're recording with GoFundMe that walks sponsors through the process of starting a GoFundMe page if they are looking for fundraising solutions to pay this fee. You can find this resource on our website on December 4th. Additionally, on October 30th, the Department of Homeland Security announced that it will end the automatic extension of employment authorization documents, also known as EADs, for many newcomers who applied to renew them. Before this rule, EAD renewal applicants could continue to work for up to 540 days after their old card expired while waiting for the new one to be approved. The automatic work authorization will no longer apply to renewal applications filed on or after October 30th. This change means many newcomers could experience gaps in their ability to work while waiting for the renewal to be processed. The changes impact asylum seekers, refugees, and green card applicants. Temporary protected status or TPS recipients may still receive limited automatic extensions, but these will be shorter and will depend on specific government announcements related to each TPS designation. These changes do not apply to newcomers who currently have an EAD through humanitarian parole status, as their EADs were never eligible for automatic extensions. So if your beneficiary is getting their EAD through another status that is not humanitarian parole, it is important to check if they are going to be affected by the automatic extension or not, given the fact that it is affecting many other populations outside of humanitarian parolees, including green cards, asylum seekers, and refugees. Additionally, you may have seen that on October 31st, President Trump released the refugee admissions cap, limiting entry to 7,500 refugees for fiscal year 2026. The fiscal year runs from October 1st, 2025 through September 30th, 2026. This safe and legal pathway and the ceiling set by the president for the last 45 years has allowed many Americans to offer safety and hope to newcomers fleeing danger, violence, and persecution. Earlier news reports stated that the president would issue the presidential determination after the government shutdown ended, and he could consult with Congress as required. Although there is ongoing disagreement about whether the official consultation occurred, the presidential determination finalizing the refugee admissions cap was issued on October 31st. While President Trump's determination on refugee admissions cap does not provide details on refugee processing for those who are already in the U.S. refugee admissions pipeline, it said that most of the refugees admitted will be Afrikaners from South Africa and other victims of illegal or unjust discrimination in their respective homelands. Now, I know we're receiving many questions in the Q&A, and we've received questions submitted ahead of the webinar as well about what this means for sponsorship pathways and for refugees who are already in the resettlement pipeline, and many folks who sponsored individuals through Welcome Corps. I want to make very clear that the administration has provided no clarification about what will happen to these individuals, only that South African Afrikaners and other victims of illegal and unjust discrimination in their respective homeland will be prioritized. As soon as we know more in terms of how other folks who are already in the pipeline will be considered, we will update our policy updates page that you all can follow. Now I want to take some time to answer some questions that were submitted by you all during registration. As a reminder, we're not answering live questions today, but I will answer questions in the chat. The first question is, has the administration stopped processing green card applications for Afghans? There are some reported pauses and delays with processing green cards for refugees and asylees, but it does not seem that all Afghan green card applicants are fully stopped. Some special immigrant visa-based applications are still being processed, which is also a green card. The second question is, can Ukrainians legally stay here pending a reply for reparole, which is sometimes further than 1.5 years of processing? We currently recommend consulting our considerations document and guidance from your legal counsel on the best options when your beneficiary's parole status has expired and are waiting reparole. We're dropping a link to this document in the chat. The next question is sponsoring through community sponsorship hubs still possible for special immigrant visa Afghan families? Yes, sponsoring Afghan SIV families is still possible through CSH's sponsor circles. We're dropping a link to learn more in the chat. Another question is, I saw a news report that a Trump administration plan could limit green cards for immigrants from travel ban countries. Is this true? First, I do want to note that this policy change has actually not been issued yet, so no changes have been made. Second, while the US government may pause or delay adjustment of status for refugees and asylees who were already in the United States, for example, if they cite vetting concerns, they cannot remove the authority in the law that allows for adjustment of status applications if these populations qualify, because refugees and asylees have status that is protected. So for refugees and asylees from travel ban countries such as Afghanistan or Venezuela, the administration cannot remove the ability to adjust status if they qualify. When we know more and if the plan does become official, we will share more information in our email updates on our website and in these webinars. Thank you all for your questions, and now I'll hand it back to Ella.
Thank you so much, Manpreet. If you've been tuning into our webinars for a while now, you know we always provide policy updates on policies that may impact newcomers in your communities or those you've sponsored. That's because we've heard from you that understanding policy updates is important to you. We've also heard how important it is to see welcoming in action, not just as an ideal, but as an everyday achievable action. So, grounded in an understanding, thanks to Manpreet, of what's going on in policy, it's just as important to elevate the stories of welcomers like you who are doing incredible work right now all across the country. We're now going to hear from our four individuals who have really demonstrated what it means to be a welcomer. We use that term at welcome.us a lot. To us, welcomers are more than volunteers. They're friends and neighbors who support newcomers through acts like private sponsorship, also through offering guidance to their new neighbors, to donating, to celebrating important moments together. That's why we put together the Heart of Welcome campaign last month, which allowed people from across the country to nominate someone they know who has exemplified the spirit of welcome. I know from my own experience that hearing stories inspires me to reflect on my own. So that's the goal of the panel today, to spark creative thinking, to inspire acts of welcome, and to encourage you all to keep doing the work that you are doing. So with that, welcome Seal, Matt, Susan, and Jessica to the table. Jessica, I want to start with you. You were nominated for the Heart of Welcome by your colleagues for your passionate commitment to newcomers in California. Can you please share with us why you first got involved in this work?
For years, my partner and I participated in this wonderful event called Gish. As core, it was a celebration of creativity, connection, and spreading kindness. One year during Gish, the organizers connected with four Syrian refugee families in very dire situations. At the time, I was living out of funds, but working together with thousands of other people, we were able to raise enough money not only to meet these families' basic needs, but to ensure they had the support they needed for the following years to rebuild their lives. As a disabled person myself, it was especially meaningful to see the difference made for the three people in these families who were severely disabled but lacked access to even the most basic care and equipment. A little girl with spina bifida, the condition I have, was able to go outside and play because she finally had a wheelchair. That seems like a simple thing, but for her family, after fleeing war, it was impossible without help. It was such a powerful experience to be part of in my own small way, and to see what we accomplished together, which is action. Years later, I learned about a new nonprofit in my area called Soul for Home. Soul for Home was founded by some amazing individuals who refused to look the other way when they knew people needed help. I joined shortly before our first family arrived. My initial role was limited, helping people navigate medical appointments, something I have a lot of experience with. What stood out to me from the beginning was the idea that Slow for Home was not simply bringing families here, but committing to their well-being and ability to truly join our community. That felt so true to the spirit of what we did with Gish to help the Syrian refugees, and really encouraged me to jump in further with Slow for Home. In those early days of preparing for a new family, so many people with no experience from resettling refugees came together to offer their time, talents, and experience in whatever ways they could. Because those same people made space for my needs as a disabled person in ways no other organization has, my involvement quickly grew beyond anything I expected into organizing clothing drives, co-leading our culture and hospitality volunteers, and working directly with the families on their day-to-day adjustments to life in the United States. Organization focuses heavily on ensuring families have what they need to thrive, not just survive, and this includes truly welcoming them to be part of our lives, so I soon found that I had many new friends. Not only did I meet some incredibly compassionate, generous people and my fellow volunteers, it was a privilege getting to know refugees who had faced almost unimaginable challenges to find safety, but remained wonderfully kind, open, and determined. When I first started with Soul for Home, I wasn't sure how long my involvement would last. After getting to know the families who came with our organization, I can't imagine not being involved going forward. I've heard directly from the families we helped what a difference it made to be welcomed by people who were genuinely excited to see them, who invited them into their homes for meals and walked with them through both successes and struggles.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Yeah, if you didn't catch that, it was Slow for Hum, SLO, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And Susan, I know that you have another story about why you got involved in this work. We first heard your story actually when you appeared in an article about how Ukrainians you'd sponsored were successfully granted reparole back in August. Since then, you've helped families apply and receive reparole, and you've been an inspiration for other sponsors connected to Welcome.us to do the same. But your story, I know, and you know, didn't begin with the highlight of the summer, which was reparole. Can you share a little bit about when your story of welcoming began? What first inspired you, and what was going on in your mind?
Hi, greetings everyone. I'm Susan Bueller, and my husband Bruce and I are a retired couple that live in Watertown, South Dakota, population 23,000. So it's a nice little town in the middle of the country, far away from Putin. We helped sponsor a family of 4 from Ukraine in August of 23. And that process started about 3 months earlier. But honestly, I guess that I've always had a heart of compassion for other people. So to back up, I've been interested in other cultures, other languages. When I was 13, I met a girl from Vietnam. Her family were political refugees that escaped and made their way to America. So that was exciting to get to know her and her family. And then also in my senior year, we had nine foreign exchange students, and I made it I made a point of befriending all of them and making them feel welcome, and getting to know their languages is exciting and kind of exhilarating and intriguing. But nowadays, we have apps and everything to make it so much easier, so that there's no hesitations. And when you have compassion, you just want to overcome that barrier. So when we first saw the news of Russia invading Ukraine in early of 22, like everyone else, my heart sank and went out to everyone there. The devastation, destruction, the pure theft of a country was so unconscionable. And the incessant attacks were all over the news. We all see it every day. And you just always feel really helpless what to do. So we live in a huge world that has so many sad stories and atrocities like this one. Well, what can we humanly do about it? Well, I found welcome.us has been a major conduit to providing resources and information for the people in need, but also the people who want to help.
Thank you, Susan. Seal, I'm going to point the next question to you. You've been a welcomer for decades, and your church community has noticed. You were nominated by Father Jim Heiser, who I'm going to quote him really quickly. He said, "Seal has worked tirelessly to help refugees of the terrible Russian invasion of Ukraine come to our US of A. And once they arrived, she has continued to work tirelessly to accompany them in their new environments." So, Seal, when the United States bishops urged every parish in the country to welcome a Ukrainian family in 2023, you stepped up immediately and invited others to join you. Can you share more about what your thinking was and when and why you said yes?
Well, yeah, like you said, I've been encountering refugees all my life, from the Cuban Missile Crisis to Nicaraguans, to helping Mexicans on a ranch we managed. It just seems like they keep coming into my life and enriching it. So I was, again, like Susan, furious over the invasion. And I was excited when our bishop said he would like every parish in Wyoming to sponsor a Ukrainian family. Father Jim, who nominated me, had been our pastor just before, and he's Ukrainian. And so we had learned a lot of the culture. We learned a lot of the Ukrainian responses at Mass. They became, part of our world then. And so when we received the information about becoming a welcome circle, our current pastor said, fine. We put an announcement in the bulletin. He spoke at all the masses. Within a week, I had 9 people committed to form the welcome circle. And the entire parish just jumped in with offers to donate and what do they need and this, that, and the other. So it's been a group experience, not just me, but a real group experience. And the entire town got involved. We're about, I think, 30,000 in the county. So we're a lot like Susan's place. Is just kind of a small, great place to live. And the people really showed it.
Yeah, I think that speaks a lot about, how powerful it is to welcome newcomers. It's not just one person, it's an entire community. I want to point the next question to Matt. Matt, you were nominated by No One Left Behind for your tireless work to help get the word out about SIV sponsorship through local media. Your involvement with welcoming didn't start with sponsorship, but several years ago as a volunteer for a local resettlement agency. Can you share a bit about what first inspired you to get involved in this work?
Sure thing. So I'm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, if you're not familiar. We've had a long history of welcoming here and of welcoming people fleeing persecution. Most people know Lancaster because of the Amish, and I like to remind people that they were the original refugees coming to this area. They were pushed out of Europe for their religious beliefs. So I was always proud of that. But then in 2017, I helped invite Malala Yousafzai, the Nobel Prize winner, who was targeted by the Taliban for her beliefs about girls' education, to Lancaster, and was surprised to find that she said yes. And so she came here, and that was such an inspiring visit, because even though she was this world famous figure and she was somebody who was, the whole world wanted to know about, all she wanted to know about what it was like to be a teenager and a refugee in Lancaster. She wanted to know what the customs were like, how people treated you, what else she could do to speak out on behalf of the folks that were in Lancaster as refugees. And one of the most amazing things that came of that, other than getting to have, dinner with her and spend a day with her and all that stuff, was that she actually took a Congolese refugee from Lancaster on her Girls Rock tour across the world to talk about the needs of women and girl refugees around the world. So that I went from being a volunteer and helping out and a donor to, this is how I want to spend my life. I want to work on in this area and double down on the fact that Lancaster welcoming wasn't just just this neat historical fact. This was something that was ongoing. This was something that I wanted to ramp up, and as the Afghan situation and the Ukrainian situation took over, it was the sort of first time that we were seeing folks coming directly from these current events. Like it was, somebody saw something on the news and I got a million phone calls like, are we going to be having Afghans here? Are we going to have Ukrainians here? And of course we did. But that meeting, and it's amazing that she came here to say thank you to Lancaster for what it was doing. That meeting definitely supercharged my willingness and interest in this area and kind of changed the course of my career and personal life. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hearing a theme here that proximity is what's building empathy. So Matt, I want to ask you a follow-up question. So while you've been involved in this work for a very long time now, I know this year has looked really different for you, and I'm sure for many of those in our audience. What has welcoming looked like for you more recently?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you say this a lot, but this is unprecedented times for welcoming. It's very difficult, both in terms of policy, as we went over at you went over at the very beginning of the webinar, but also in rhetoric and in people's feelings about immigrants. At the right after the inauguration, about 2 weeks after, I and about 70% of the folks that I work with at a local resettlement agency were furloughed. And really believed that there would be no way back to being in resettlement again. In a weird way, that kind of unleashed me to do some things that, I wanted to do anyway. The first thing we did was created a mutual aid network for all the furloughed folks, many of whom were former refugees themselves. I'm always so proud that of the folks that work at the resettlement agency, I would say at least 25-30% are refugees or immigrants themselves. We have 26 languages spoken in our office. And so the first thought was, how do we do the basics? How do we do unemployment? How do we do all of these other things? It was like we were doing those services for each other that we provide for clients. But then it also allowed me to speak out. I didn't have to worry as much about representing an organization. So I got to speak at several rallies. I was organizing meetings with our state senator, or our senators and local representatives. And it allowed me to be able to just kind of speak out of the entire frustration of the community, not just from, the vantage point of a nonprofit that works with refugees. At the same time, it kind of showed once again the mettle of this community and showed how much welcoming was in the DNA, because we saw so much support. We had so many people come out of the woodwork, so many people do extraordinary things. And while it's frustrating that it takes a crisis like this to get people to think about it, it's also just amazing to see the depths that people, the depths of people's caring. I mean, people would come out and just say, I will let somebody live at my house. I will let somebody I will feed this person, for as long as you need. We had somebody who, after reading an op-ed that I helped co-author with somebody, donated $120,000 to have a deportation defense attorney. I mean, just like the community was primed to come out and do it. So even though the work has looked differently and it feels, as I'm sure many of you in the out there feel, that the headwinds are there and that it's really difficult, and every day there just seems to be a new thing that hurts our immigrant friends, and yet the community seems to be, counterbalancing that with so much care and so much community. For just last example, as was mentioned earlier, the One Big Beautiful Bill does eliminate SNAP benefits for refugees, and we recently opened a food bank that has culturally appropriate food. Sadly and awesomely, all 40 spots were taken until I think January, like every spot for every day that it's open. And then the community just said, okay, well, we'll just donate double that. And so that now we're seeing more and more food and more ability for people to, it stinks that that has to happen, but it's amazing what the community will do.
Yeah, I want to double click on that a little bit on how important community has been, especially this year. Seal, I want to ask this one to you. Welcoming newcomers, especially those who are, starting from zero, it takes an entire community. So, what are some of the ways that your community has stepped up to support the Ukrainian families you've sponsored, even if they're not sponsors themselves?
Well, the parish set up a special fund just for our Ukrainians, and the donations poured in. We had a parishioner who was a realtor who put us at the top of the list for the next rental that came up. And this is a big thing in Sheridan because low income housing is tough here. And we by the time they were ready, we had an apartment. People donated furniture. We could have furnished probably 3 or 4 apartments with what was offered. So we had a chance to say what'll work best for this family. Um, the parish committed to pay our family's rent for 2 years. And now that they've been here 2 years since April, this summer we dropped that to half their rent, and gradually they will wean off totally. Yeah, our parish thrift shop helped them with all kinds of supplies. 2 businesses offered to hire any Ukrainians who came. It didn't matter if they spoke English, they would teach them what they needed to know. They've been great. The dad, Ruslan, had a choice of jobs waiting for him as soon as he got his Social Security card. When he and their 8-year-old daughter, Sophia, needed glasses, a local eye clinic, of which a parishioner was a part, gave us a huge discount, and another parishioner picked up the difference in the tab. Uh, Holy Name School, our parish school, gave Sophia a scholarship so she'd go to there. Maria was pregnant when they arrived. Michael was born in August. The parish gave a huge baby shower, and we just had a ball. We probably had a couple hundred people attend that. They got everything they needed for the baby. A local Sheridanite who's not a parishioner continues to buy his diapers. Um, Social Security was uncooperative, and it took 3 months for Ruslan to finally get his card to be able to work. So the parish and a lot of parishioners found day jobs for him, found ways to work, and also helped pay the families, even just like to pay for their cell phone service. We kept them going because when you leave and you have a backpack and that's all you have, and it takes you thousands to get here, you don't have any resources to fall back on. So everybody said, how can we help? People found them cars, they found them repairmen because the cars were old. um, we have a list of people still who said call if they need anything. Our local paper did a feature on them, welcoming them. It's just been overwhelming to see how everybody has stepped up and even anticipated, could they possibly need this? Will they need this at some point? Um, our family that we adopted has extended family who were already here. And that whole family opened a very popular Ukrainian Italian restaurant. The entire Sheridan community has supported that restaurant. It's always busy when I drop in to get a meal. It's always packed. Maria, the mother, worked there until she got a room as an aide at the Catholic school. We sponsored Ruslan's parents and uncle, and the community, same thing. Realtor found us an apartment. We furnished it. We got them going, but they were homesick for the Ukraine, and they finally decided in December they were going home, even if they died. They just missed home so much. We also sponsored Maria's cousin and her husband, but they had jobs waiting for them in Miami, so they went directly there. They never came here. But I want to emphasize that our welcome circle should be recognized rather than just me. We have an incredible group. In this group, someone had the talents to handle everything that was needed. Uh, some members helped them with paperwork, like all the government, Social Security, with job applications and interviews, signing up for medical coverage, helping find daycare for Michael when Marie went to work, even dealing with the hospital when she had Michael. Some members are great at hospitality, and they introduce the family to all the things that go on. When we have summer here in Wyoming, there is something going on nearly every weekend. We have a huge rodeo with a carnival and everything. And there's a Crow Indian Fair just north of us into Montana. Somebody took them fishing in the mountains. One installed a window air conditioner for them because for some reason the apartment didn't come with air conditioning. I think I've forgotten other stuff, but it's the whole community said, I have this talent. Can you use it? It's been incredible.
I love that, Seal, so much. Yeah, that's another common theme I'm seeing here too, is that community is what is really driving this. Jessica, I want to ask the next question to you. You're in an interesting position as someone who has both volunteered, but then also worked professionally to support your new neighbors. What has welcoming meant to you this year?
2025 was incredibly challenging, but also very beautiful in seeing how everyone stepped up to meet those challenges. Not long after we learned that the family we had matched with was not going to be able to come due to policy changes, we received an email from a newly arrived refugee. He was looking for help not for himself, but his friends. His friends had SIVs thanks to their support of US forces in Afghanistan and were running out of time to enter the US. With very little notice, So For Home jumped into action to bring 7 people located in 2 different countries to the US before their travel authorization expired. Faced with very high unexpected costs for plane tickets, it was wonderful to see how our wider community rallied to raise those funds in very little time while we worked behind the scenes to figure out the complicated logistics. It was exhausting and daunting for many of us, but watching the newest families arrive at the airport made it all worth it. I could see the relief in their eyes when they found a warm, welcoming group of people waiting for them, including some of the past families we've helped who were able to greet them in their own language and share a home cooked meal with them with Afghan ingredients. Since then, we have been able to welcome another Afghan family who was in a particularly bad situation and needed immediate relocation, leaving us 3 days for our housing coordinator, Kathy, and her team to transform a small apartment into a warm, inviting home. Something we make a point to do once families arrive is mix in fun with all of the more stressful parts of settling in. It's not just about meeting basic needs. A lot of the families feel overwhelmed by the paperwork and planning when they first come. The families we had come this year were much more anxious due to all of the regulatory changes, so we made a point of building those positive experiences as much as possible. A special memory for me was getting a call from one of our most recent families that they would really love to go visit the beach. Everyone wants to come and see the beach when they get here. Myself, my partner, and Susan, a longtime volunteer, quickly packed up and took the family for a beach day. After picnic lunch, everyone decided to take their first dip in the ocean, but their youngest daughter was a little scared, so I stayed on the beach with her. She wanted to build sandcastles, so I showed her how, and she had the brightest smile and kept clapping and yelling sandcastles. Before this, she'd been a little wary and shy around me, but we spent 20 minutes building sandcastles together. When I started off with So For Home, I thought the most important way I could help was assisting people with their practical needs, finding clothes, signing up for insurance, getting their social services benefits started. That was a major and fulfilling part of my work this year, but what keeps me doing this is the moments like sitting on the beach with a little girl and seeing her glee at building her first sandcastle. For me, truly welcoming someone is to help them find joy and a sense of safety again in their new home. And that is more critical now than ever. Seeing the many ways people pulled together to help these 3 families this year and how much of an impact it made on them really emphasized to me how valuable and needed that is to a family starting over with nothing. Whether or not you have funds to donate, a love for cooking and sharing a meal, or the time just to take somebody out for a fun day in your community, you're telling them they are wanted and welcome and giving them a soft landing. I've been so impressed with the ways my fellow volunteers have showed up for that this year.
Yeah, it's the small things and the big things and all the things combined that I bet makes those families feel so, so welcomed just sitting on the beach. So thank you, Jessica, for that. As I'm sure that you've experienced, Susan, supporting newcomer families is not a solo act either, as we've heard from other speakers. It often requires the entire community, like we've said before, to get involved. So not everyone who supported Ukrainians you sponsored were sponsors themselves, but helped in other ways. What are some of the ways that non-sponsors in your communities have come around these families?
Well, our church hosted a meeting for being a potential sponsor for the United for Ukraine program. And I asked my husband to join me so we could educate ourselves on what the responsibilities would be. And we came away from the meeting feeling very hopeful, but not sure we could commit to all the responsibilities. But a week later, I received a text, and I usually talk to my husband before I make a decision, but um, I got this text from the church saying that there's 8 families that would like to go in together on hosting a family. And so I immediately replied back and said, we would love to help host a family. We have a fully finished basement that's furnished, everything. But, it'd be awesome to have other people come in and help us with those things. So, and since the family would be living with us, they let us choose our family. So when you go to the website, it looks like a dating website. You see the people and their stories. And so I very specifically prayed for a great fit to welcome a family. And we chose our Belazé family. We had a video chat with them. We had somebody help us with as an interpreter, and we became very excited. So all the other sponsors played a part in so many ways, like you said, Ella and Sil. It takes a community to do all this work. Other people chipped in and put money in a fund for this family. Our church paid for their plane tickets. The sponsors came together and they filled their refrigerator and cupboards full of food. Our neighbor came down the second day Valeri was in America and interviewed him with an app, gave him a job, and God bless him, yet he gave him a ride to work every day. So that was so fortunate. When we went over to Minneapolis to pick up our family, our Pastor Mark Tracy said, should we take an interpreter? I said, no, we don't need it. But he did all the paperwork. He did all signed on the dotted line. And so we all came together, and I helped the kids get signed up for school before they came, because just get all the paperwork done, everything done. Using an app and speaking with Alona, we got that all taken care of. And then as soon as they came, there's appointments, like all of you here know, there's appointments for dentists and doctors and Social Security, and every single one of those takes a ride for those people. So we all chipped in together and helped that. Neighbor across the street bought all of the soccer supplies for Benjamin. And we had families donate furniture, lots of furniture after they got their first home. People came over and donated clothes. Just our community opened their arms. And our family was able to save $40,000 while they lived here in our home for 10 months. And then they moved into their own home. And it looks amazing. Valeria and Ilona have Benjamin, who's 15, and Dominica's 11. And since they've moved here, we have an addition to our family. And little Brian was born a year ago, and I'm now a babushka. So we are really bonded as a family, planning our holidays together again. And Bruce said to me after they were here 2 weeks, he goes, wow, we were so lucky with our family. They're amazing. And I reminded him that we weren't just lucky. We prayed for a right fit.
Wow, that's really inspiring. I dream to be a babushka to a family like that. Well, thank you so much, Susan, for sharing that. I want to offer the next few minutes that we have remaining for your soapbox moment. I know that all of you have so many stories, but first I want to hear from Seal. So this has clearly been a really life-changing experience for you, and I know that we've only heard really the tip of the iceberg. Throughout this experience, what is something you wish others knew about welcoming, or something that you learned along the way that maybe you didn't know before?
I think first off, all of us have realized how very lucky we are. We have never had our sleep interrupted by missiles or bombs, never feared to go to sleep because we might not wake up, never had to leave everything except what we can carry and move far away to a place with a totally different culture and language. We have learned to be grateful. We've also learned a lot about the Ukraine, its values, its beautiful culture and lifestyle before the war, and the creativity and sheer tenacity as individuals as well as a country that the entire population has used to fight the evil invaders. We learned what a fascinating history the Ukraine has and how hard the Ukrainians have worked to establish and keep a democracy despite being invaded so many times. We have learned how much we have in common with strangers, with refugees. We have learned how to communicate. Several of us tried to learn Ukrainian, but were defeated by its difficulty. But we communicate not only with words, but with gesture, and the translation apps are fantastic. We've been overwhelmed by the sheer goodness of people in our community, many of whom we never knew until they called asking if they could help. I continue to be stopped on the street and asked, how are our Ukrainians and do they need anything? It has been a joy and a privilege to incorporate Ukrainian family into our lives. The gifts they bring us, all the work and worry, especially now, is nothing compared to what we have received.
Wow, I love that, Seal. And I know that many in our audience have felt many similar things, and I know that I have. So I want to ask this next one to Matt. Matt, this is your soapbox moment. As someone who's worked really closely to support newcomers in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, you've seen ways that your community has been changed and revitalized, and you have as well. Can you describe how your community has welcomed newcomers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the common thread through everybody's response is just that we get more out of the welcoming than the folks that are welcomed. Especially with the Afghan folks that I work with, I constantly remind our local congressional office and all the people that I talk to that aren't sure about continuing welcome that a lot of these folks have done more for America than I'll ever get the chance to do. They've fought, they've risked their entire lives and livelihoods for this. But even on a kind of more nuts and bolts sense, that's the feeling that we get, and I think that it's contagious, and everybody here benefits from a different culture, understanding things differently. I like the way you put it, Seal, just that like we learn that we have it so good that even things like having to try to learn Google Translate or using the apps or whatever is something that stretches people and not always comfortably. At first you're, oh, I don't want to feel awkward. I don't want to, and it gives you this new perspective of seeing your world as it might look from somebody else's perspective. But I also like to point out that in all of the nationwide discussions about immigration, no one seems to be pointing out that how much we need immigrants, how much our natural population is going down, how much in Pennsylvania we're an older population, we're losing college kids at an alarming rate, that immigrants are twice as likely to start a business in the state of PA than native-born Pennsylvanians will. All of these things are we absolutely need. The downward spiral of demographic change is not a good thing to start out on. I like to point out that we need folks at every level, from doctors to warehouse workers. And then the other thing that I don't think gets talked about enough, and something that I will always say for my town, it's a town of 60,000 people, and we have a food scene unlike anywhere else in the area. The New York Times did a story about it, an unlikely food oasis in an Amish area, which I can, from my apartment in the middle of downtown, I can walk to four pho places. I can go to get Bhutanese, I can get Nepali, I can get Afghan food, Iraqi, kebabs. I mean, everything that you could think of and it's so revitalizing. I was helpful in getting several new Americans on city council, helping them, be part of the next generation of leadership. And I'll leave with this idea. In the 2020 election, I worked with a Nepali youth, and before we even did voting, we did the census. And I got to tell you, I was very disappointed to have to try to get people excited about a census. It's not nobody's idea. Do we get things once we no? Does this mean that there's more, resources? Well, in a long-term way, yes. But those Bhutanese Nepali folks were like, we spent our entire lives not being citizens or residents of any country. We were stateless. We didn't exist as far as the world was considered. So even being counted, when that census came out, there was Nepali American written next to thousands of people's names. They put that down. And then when we went to vote, I looked around at my friends, I looked around at people I don't agree with, and everybody had this dour attitude about America. Is this worth it? What's the point? Who cares who wins? It's all the same. And these young Nepalis were like, no, we still see the value in America. We see why democracy is important. We want our voices to be heard. And they spent every weekend with me calling basically every Nepali number we could find in the state and just encouraging people to vote. It wasn't partisan, but just calling people and saying, get involved. And their excitement at America causes me to see America through their eyes and remember that this place has promise and this is always how it's been. I think I said to you, Ella, that I saw a lecture recently that said 25% of America has always been immigrants or the children of immigrants. And most scholars look at that and say, that's why we've continued to progress. That's why we've continued to be strong and resilient and new and creative. And so the idea that we can get out of our current malaise by limiting immigration and stopping people from coming here is just shooting yourself in the foot and then wondering why you're bleeding. It's just an insane situation.
Yeah. America is changed by newcomers, and we're made better for them. Thank you for sharing that, Matt. Jessica, your soapbox moment as well. As one of the nominees, I'd love to hear what you've learned from your experience as a welcomer. What changed in your heart or your perspective?
Resettling refugees became so much more than just an opportunity to help others. I have seen my community grow stronger because we have welcomed these incredibly capable, generous, and resilient people to be part of it. Community members who were uncertain about inviting others from such different cultures have value and beauty of welcoming strangers become their new neighbors and friends. I've learned so much personally and challenged myself in many ways, but I did that both by supporting the refugees and learning from them and their experiences. I think people who have gone through war, hunger, and forced displacement can be really heart-wrenching at times, and it's easy to get caught up in the enormity of these problems. Being part of home has shown me that even these difficult this human connection and commitment to working towards change together is so powerful. We're each doing our own little part to make a change together that looks like so many lives for sheep and hard to go.
Jessica, you are cutting out for a second. So sorry.
We're in a storm right now, so
I can't. I'm so sorry. Can I hear you one more time?
Could you hear part of that?
I think your internet is losing us a little bit. I'm gonna hand it over to Susan and we'll see if you're back on. Okay, great. So Susan, I know that you've mentioned the family you sponsored was granted re-parole, but this wasn't an easy journey. It involved sharing your story publicly, contacting your representative, and continuing to contact their office until they were able to provide assistance. We're going to drop a link to an on-demand webinar that we recorded about how to apply for Ukrainian re-parole in the chat. But I'd love to hear from you personally. How did you get a hold of your representative? What was the experience like? And it's common to feel stuck in like the loop of voicemails and unanswered emails. So what was that process like for you?
Yeah, when our family was notified by their immigration attorney that their efforts for asylum and for the appeals, they were denied. And they thought that they would have years to leverage this protection. And they got a response on both within less than a month that they were denied. So I think their world was kind of spinning and they just went into shock. And they never want to leave America. And I believe that they were actually feeling re-traumatized from losing their first home. And they just didn't seem to be able to move. But they don't want to go back to Russia. Russia occupies the area where they lived. A fourth of Ukraine, the borders have moved now, and Russia has a fourth of Ukraine that they're occupying. And where they lived, 95% of their city was destroyed and is now reculturized. Kids cannot speak Ukrainian there at all. In France, when they lived there, if you didn't speak French, you couldn't work there. So they just really want to stay in America. But the lawyer told them August 18th, they will start gaining a legal presence in the United States. And so I had a sense of urgency and panic coming over us. And if our country deports you, they'll send you back to your country of origin. But if you self-deport, you have to figure that out. And then when I heard the news about Alligator Alcatraz, the new detention center, my blood boiled with the thought of my family being ripped away from me. And I was very thankful to Welcome.us. They gave us a canned letter with resources and provided a link to write our congressional letters to leaders to plead for help, which I did. And I made a personal plea and I got back generic responses. It seemed like when you call USCIS, it's overwhelming. They have 1,000 forms and you get on the voicemail and the different references. You just get on a roundabout and you can't seem to get anywhere, get anyone on the phone or leave a voicemail. So on my calendar, I was counting down the days to create that sense of urgency. Ilona filled out a form and she wasn't sure if it was the right form. And we didn't know if it was correct. And you have to be a lawyer to read through some of those forms too. So I guess in desperation, I made a social media, which my husband would say, don't put your emotions out on the social media. But I felt desperate. What else can we do except to get their story out there and tell people? And I told Ilona, in America, we have a saying that's the wheel that squeaks the loudest gets the oil. So I said, let's share your story. Let's put it out there. Let's plead for help. I don't know what else to do. And our 2 posts got shared 340 times. Then all of a sudden we started getting phone calls from news resources, Dakota News Now, KELOLAND, KSFY, local newspapers, all shared their story and asked us to do many interviews. And we finally got a call from Dusty Johnson's office. A representative there said, what can we do to help? And I said, I don't even know if we have the right form or not, if we're filling it out correctly. I can't get anyone on the phone. They have a liaison that works in that office. So they contacted them and confirmed the form was correct, but they suggested that we fill out an expedition request. And they also said what we should do along with that, the criteria that you need. So I believe they're going to drop all that in the chat, the things that we've learned from that. But so we did provide pictures of their bombed out home before and after, the Ukrainian borders before and after. And I believe all of that made a big difference. They did receive their re-parole 3 weeks before their parole expired.
Wow. Yeah, Susan, it was the tenacity of you and your community and reaching out to your representatives and wanting to share their story that I think really made the difference there. So for those in our audience who are still maybe waiting on an answer for re-parole, I do encourage you to check out the on-demand webinar that we dropped in the chat, and it could walk you through the entire process, including the expedited request that Susan mentioned. Well, thank you all panelists so much for joining us today. I hope that their stories were inspiring to you and that you can share them with those in your community as well. As we saw with Susan and Seal, the desire to do something led to saying yes to an opportunity that would change their lives. For them, it was sponsorship, but for Jessica and Matt, it was supporting newcomers in other ways, like helping their new neighbors find housing or file paperwork, finding jobs, getting plugged into the community. And all 4 of our speakers show us that communities that come around newcomers benefit as a result. Church groups came together, new holidays were celebrated, neighbors maybe who wouldn't have considered themselves invested got involved in a new meaningful way. In your town, welcoming might start with just one person, but it rarely ends that way. I know that many of you in our audience who are tuning in today are listening so that you can learn what you can actually do now. So Susan mentioned contacting a representative, and I do want to point you to this tool, which we've recently changed to include a call your rep feature. As we've shared in previous webinars, voicing your support for the newcomers in your community is an excellent way to show your support and to get your representatives aware of what's happening. Your representatives track the messages you send to understand the opinion of the people that they represent, which has the power to change decisions. Telling your representative that you care about immigration pathways and that you want them to make decisions that reflect that is a quick and effective way to take action. You'll notice if you open the link we're dropping in the chat that we've added that new feature, which is an option to call instead of sending an email to your representative. So if you haven't already, consider taking just 2 minutes to use this tool. The email tool is also still available if you prefer to reach out that way. Or maybe you were inspired by our speakers and you're looking for volunteer opportunities in your area. In the chat, we're dropping a link to our volunteer map, which is an inexhaustive list of opportunities across the country. If there's nothing in your area on this map, it can still give you some ideas of the opportunities that are out there. You might consider getting involved in your place of worship, maybe a local food pantry, like was mentioned by our guest speakers, the library, or other organizations that support newcomers. Like our speakers shared today, engaging in even the smallest ways can make a difference. And finally, if you want to learn more about Heart of Welcome nominees, you can read all about them and others on the webpage we're dropping in the chat. Our next webinar is on December 18th and will be focused on refugee housing solutions for newcomers in the holiday season. We'll also be dedicating some time to live Q&A, so make sure to ask your questions when you register or in the survey that will pop up on your screen as soon as this webinar ends. You can register using the link below. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you next month on December 18th. Thank you and be well.